these original lawn darts were banned.
Candy cigarettes! I'm just like you, Dad! Candy cigarettes!
It made paint moisture-proof and durable.
The 1960s was an era of moon landings, hippie revolutions, and sleek muscle cars tearing down endless highways. But behind all the groovy music and tie-dye shirts, there lurked a darker side of innovation, a time when the thirst for progress outpaced caution, and some of the most dangerous inventions the world has ever seen were unleashed upon the world. Join us as we dive deep into 25 of the most dangerous inventions of the 1960s that are now banned. Can you believe there was actually a toy set in the 1960s that came with real uranium? Yes, you heard that right. Actual radioactive material in a box meant for kids. It was called the Gilbert U-238 Atomic Energy Lab, and the idea was to help kids learn about nuclear energy.
Gilbert is most known for their Rector sets, were quite popular in the 50s. With science kits being even more popular, live samples of plutonium and uranium, that's what makes this science kit so rare.
But seriously, who thought giving kids radioactive rocks to play with was a good idea? Imagine little Johnny in his room, casually playing with uranium while his parents think he's just doing a science experiment. Yikes. This so-called educational kit was supposed to be fun, but it was essentially a mini nuclear lab, and quite dangerous.
Which features the classic comic book couple Blondie and Dagwood Bumstead, as well as their children, dog, and friends, who all explain the basics of atomic energy.
While it was sold for a few years, growing safety concerns eventually led to its discontinuation. What a wild time. Oh, lawn darts. Probably one of the most dangerous toys ever to hit backyards. Imagine giant darts, almost like mini javelins, but with heavy metal tips designed to stick into the ground. Sounds fun, right? Well, not when they went flying in the wrong direction. Instead of landing safely on the grass, these sharp projectiles often ended up hitting people, especially children.
The stuff you might not want to talk about too much because some say these original lawn darts were banned.
Picture a family barbecue turning into a trip to the emergency room. Believe it or not, back in the 1960s, lawn darts were quite popular. Many people played them at family gatherings and parties. However, as more and more children and adults sustained serious injuries, sometimes fatally, the U.S. government ultimately banned them due to safety concerns by the late 1980s. Back in the 1960s, lead-based paint was commonly used in homes, on toys, and even on furniture because it was bright, durable, and resistant to peeling. However, what many people didn't realize was that this colorful paint was posing serious health risks, especially to young children.
Top layers test negative for lead. That doesn't mean that the wood fibers don't contain a certain percentage of lead paint that may have been used quite some time ago.
Imagine a toddler chewing on a toy or a windowsill. They could be ingesting tiny bits of lead. Over time, this exposure could lead to severe health problems, including brain damage, learning disabilities, and behavioral issues.
When you've been poisoned by lead, it's a permanent brain damage.
Unfortunately, it took years for the dangers of lead paint to be fully recognized. By 1978, the U.S. finally banned lead-based paint in residential properties. For much of the 60s, families were unknowingly living in environments that could harm their health. Back in the 1960s, asbestos was widely regarded as a versatile building material due to its excellent fire-resistant and insulating properties.
This was probably blown in the house when the house was built years ago. And like a lot of insulation that's blown in, it settles over time.
It was commonly used in walls, ceilings, and even in schools. However, what was not fully understood at the time was the serious health risks associated with asbestos exposure. When asbestos-containing materials are damaged or deteriorate, they can release tiny fibers into the air.
The fibers from the asbestos can get into the air, and then when you breathe them in, they can cause respiratory problems.
Inhalation of these fibers can lead to severe health issues, including lung cancer and mesothelioma, a particularly aggressive form of cancer that may take 20 to 50 years to manifest after exposure. Although the use of asbestos was largely banned in the U.S. in the late 70s, many older buildings from that era still contain this hazardous material, posing a potential risk to occupants. Can you believe that candy cigarettes were once a popular product that looked just like real cigarettes? In the mid-20th century, Particularly during the 1960s, when smoking was often glamorized and considered cool, children would walk around with these sugary sticks, pretending to be adults. They were commonly found at birthday parties and sold alongside regular candy bars in stores.
10 times a pack, and you can't beat the price. That's Hobo. H-O-B-O, Hobo.
Boy, it's really good.
However, research later revealed a concerning link. Children who smoked candy cigarettes were significantly more likely to start smoking real cigarettes as they grew older. This connection prompted many countries to ban candy cigarettes in an effort to prevent children from adopting such a dangerous habit. Looking back, it's surprising to think that these products were ever accepted in society. Can you imagine in the 1960s, many kids' pajamas were essentially fire hazards? It's true. At that time, there was little consideration for making sleepwear that wouldn't catch fire if it came into contact with a candle, heater, or spark from the fireplace. Picture a cozy bedtime scene, and suddenly, those cute pajamas could ignite in seconds. A terrifying thought.
It exposes how dodgy discount stores could be putting your child's life at risk by not including mandatory life-saving fire hazard labels.
Parents had no idea that they were tucking their children in with such dangerous materials. It wasn't until tragic accidents began to make headlines that the dangers of flammable sleepwear became widely recognized. In response, laws were enacted to ensure that all children's pajamas had to be made from flame-resistant materials, and thank goodness for that. This toy seemed fun, but turned out to be a total disaster in disguise. Clacker balls looked super simple, just two heavy plastic balls, kind of like mini bowling balls, dangling from a string. Kids could swing them up and down so they'd smash together and make a loud clack 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 noise. And let me tell you, if you could keep them going fast enough, you were basically the king or queen of the playground. However, these toys pose safety risks. They could break upon impact, potentially causing injuries, particularly to the eyes. Due to growing safety concerns and reports of injuries, their popularity declined significantly in the 1970s. Good riddance, right? Back in the 1960s, people were obsessed with using DDT. They sprayed it everywhere, on crops, in their backyards, and even on beaches where kids played. Why? Because it was effective at killing mosquitoes and other pests.
DDT and special sprayers, sections of the city are literally fogged with the insecticide in the fight to stop the spread of polio.
However, many were unaware of the dangers associated with DDT. It is toxic to humans and animals and can persist in the environment for years, accumulating in plants, animals, and even in humans.
The children born today are exposed to these chemicals from birth, perhaps even before birth. Now, what is going to happen to them in adult life?
Birds were particularly affected. DDT disrupted their ability to lay healthy eggs, leading to significant declines in bird populations.
The eagle loves to eat salmon. Oftentimes, it would eat salmon that was infected with minuscule amounts of this DDT, and that created the problem.
It wasn't until Rachel Carson's influential book, Silent Spring, was published in 1962 that the public began to recognize the dangers of DDT. Thanks to her efforts, DDT was ultimately banned in the U.S. in 1972. You won't believe this, but back in the 60s, radium, an actual radioactive material, was being used in beauty products. Yes, people were literally applying radiation to their faces, thinking it would make them look younger and give them glowing skin. Can you imagine? Folks back then believed that a little glow from radiation would smooth out wrinkles and refresh tired skin. Unfortunately, instead of achieving youthful looks, many people ended up facing serious health problems, including cancer and severe anemia. It's one of those beauty trends that makes you say, what were they thinking? Luckily, by the late 60s, awareness of the dangers led to these hazardous products being pulled off the shelves for good. Still, it's wild to think this was ever a thing. You know those old-fashioned thermometers with shiny silver liquid inside? That mysterious silver substance was mercury, and it's more dangerous than it looks. Back in the 1960s, mercury thermometers were everywhere, in homes, schools, and doctors' offices. People used them without a second thought. However, if one of those thermometers broke, tiny beads of mercury could spill out, and while the release of poisonous vapors is generally low in small quantities, it still posed a significant health risk. Breathing in mercury vapors can seriously affect your brain and nervous system, especially for children, who are more vulnerable to its toxic effects.
Spilled mercury will produce an invisible, odorless vapor that can make you sick. Breathing mercury vapors is the most common way to be exposed to elemental mercury and is the most harmful to your health.
Once scientists fully understood how hazardous mercury really was, these thermometers were gradually phased out and replaced with safer alternatives like digital and alcohol-based thermometers. It's pretty wild how awareness of health risks can change what we use every day. Oh boy, where do we even start with a Ford Pinto? Although it officially hit the roads in 1971, all the planning and designing began way back in the swinging 60s, and it turned out to have some serious safety issues.
A 1971 Ford Pinto, and it's a sedan body too, look at that.
The folks at Ford were in such a rush to create a small, affordable car that they cut a lot of corners. One major mistake? They placed the gas tank right behind the rear bumper. So, if someone tapped you from behind in traffic, there was a risk of the car catching fire, like a scene straight out of an action movie. Once the public became aware of how dangerous it was, thanks to numerous lawsuits and significant public outrage, Ford faced immense pressure regarding the Pinto's safety. While production continued for several years, the controversy surrounding the Pinto ultimately led to its discontinuation in 1980. Back in the 1960s, farmers used a chemical called ALAR that they sprayed on apple trees to keep the apples looking perfect and to prevent them from falling off the trees before it was time to harvest. It seemed like a handy solution at the time. However, scientists later discovered that ALAR was not as safe as it appeared. It was linked to potential cancer risks, particularly for children who loved snacking on apples. Imagine finding out that something as innocent as a shiny red apple could pose hidden dangers. After years of heated debates and public outcry, the government finally took action. In 1989, the Environmental Protection Agency banned ALAR from being used on food. So now, when you bite into an apple, you can enjoy it with greater peace of mind. You won't believe this, but back in the 1960s, benzene was lurking in everyday cleaning products. People used it to scrub their kitchen floors, counters, and even in industrial settings because it made everything look shiny and spotless. But here's the scary part. While folks thought they were just cleaning up, they were actually inhaling a chemical that could cause cancer.
So Valleyshore tests them before they sell them. So Valleyshore bought a bunch of products and sent them to some labs for testing using gas chromatography.
Yes, benzene is now known to be highly dangerous, linked to leukemia and other serious blood disorders.
The pharmacy Valleyshore tested more than 200 products and found the toxic chemical benzene in 44 of them. You can see the full list.
Since many people were unaware of its risks back then, families, workers, and even children were exposed without any clue. Thankfully, by the 1970s, scientists and doctors raised the alarm about benzene's dangers, leading to its removal from many household products. Still, thinking about it gives you the chills, right? Back in the 1960s, polychlorinated biphenyls, or PCBs for short, were widely used in industrial applications.
In fact, before they became widespread in the latter half of the 20th century, connecting every electrical component inside of an appliance looked a little something like this.
They were favored in transformers, capacitors, and fluorescent lights because of their non-flammability and excellent insulating properties. However, what was not fully understood at the time was the serious toxicity of PCBs.
Let's take a short break from all this technical jargon and slow down and chat. I think it's truly amazing that 50 years ago, computers took up entire rooms and looked like this.
Research later revealed that these chemicals are linked to significant health risks, including cancer, immune system disruption, and reproductive issues.
Basically, an excess of melanoma,
skin cancer and brain cancer in Indiana.
As awareness of their dangers grew, the U.S. banned the manufacturing and use of PCBs in 1979.
Congress banned a group of toxic chemicals known as PCBs in the 1970s, but by then a Westinghouse plant had already dumped more than 1 million pounds of PCB-laden waste in and around Monroe County.
Unfortunately, some older equipment still contains PCBs, posing ongoing environmental and health risks. Thus, what was once seen as a beneficial industrial chemical turned out to have a troubling legacy. Did you know that back in the 1960s, some hair dryers contained asbestos?
Let's take a look at the hairdryer itself. And as we come up the plug here, this is where the power comes in. We have another protective rubber piece and a little holder here that's molded in, which is kind of nice, so you can hang your hairdryer in the bathroom if you want to.
Yes, that same material infamous for its link to cancer. Manufacturers sometimes used it to help prevent overheating. However, as these hair dryers aged and wore out, tiny invisible asbestos fibers could potentially break loose and become airborne. Imagine getting ready for a night out and unknowingly breathing in dangerous dust that could harm your lungs. Once experts recognized the serious health risks associated with asbestos,
many people dry their hair after shampooing and they use a blow dryer. Use low heat, moderate heat, and you should have no concern from using your blow dryer as it affects your hair.
Regulations were tightened in the 1970s, leading to safer alternatives in hair dryer design. Looking back, it's surprising to think that people use these appliances without knowing the potential dangers. Back in the 1960s, cyclamate was a popular sugar substitute.
That's right. I usually put sucralose or saccharin in my coffee, and this morning for the first time I haven't had it. You know, I've always had a little box of sugar pills that I carry around with me.
Commonly found in diet sodas and low-calorie desserts. People appreciated it for providing sweetness without the extra calories. However, research conducted on lab animals later revealed a concerning link.
And secondly, there has not been a human malignancy proven as a result of the use of cyclamate.
Cyclamate was associated with bladder cancer in those subjects. This discovery sparked significant alarm, and by 1970, the FDA banned cyclamate in the United States due to these health risks. While the ban remains in effect today, some other countries still allow its use.
The announcement about artificial sweeteners adds cyclamate to tobacco, alcohol, and a list of other things that aren't good for you.
It's surprising to think that something once so widely embraced turned out to have serious health implications. Back in the 1960s, drop-side cribs gained significant popularity among parents. They were favored for their convenience, as the sides could slide down, making it easier to pick up or lay down a baby, especially during those late-night feedings. However, many parents were unaware of the serious safety risks associated with these cribs.
You may have heard millions of drop-side cribs have been pulled from store shelves because of the dangers they pose to babies.
The sliding slides could detach or malfunction, creating dangerous gaps where babies could become trapped, suffocate, or even strangle. Tragically, numerous injuries and fatalities were reported before the dangers of drop-side cribs became widely recognized. Although they were a common choice for many families, the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission ultimately banned the manufacture and sale of drop-side cribs in 2011 due to these safety concerns.
Now, the safety of your little ones. The government says drop-side cribs are dangerous and banned the sale of them in June. Local stores we checked got the notice, but online it's a different story.
Today, they're no longer used, and for good reason. You might be surprised to learn that back in the 1960s, glass soda bottles posed certain hazards. Some bottles were made from thinner glass, which could be more susceptible to breaking under pressure. While it wasn't common for bottles to explode, there were instances where defects or mishandling led to breakage, resulting in glass shards that could cause cuts or eye injuries. In some cases, people did suffer serious injuries, including eye damage from broken bottles. This led to legal action against manufacturers, prompting soda companies to improve their safety standards and use stronger glass. So, while glass soda bottles were a popular choice, they did have a history of safety concerns that eventually led to changes in manufacturing practices. Back in the 1960s, big poofy hairstyles were all the rage. Think beehives and sky-high curls. To keep those hairdos from collapsing, women often use generous amounts of hairspray every day. However, many of those popular sprays contained a variety of chemicals that raised health concerns.
Hairspray holds even in the rain. Oh, why is that? Haven't the foggiest. They say it has little umbrellas in the spray. It's that moisture-proof.
At the time, people were spraying these products right near their faces, breathing in clouds of potentially harmful fumes without realizing the risks. Some of the chemicals used in hairsprays, such as certain propellants and solvents, were linked to health issues, including respiratory problems and long-term effects. Once scientists began to understand the dangers associated with these ingredients, regulations were tightened, leading to safer formulations in hairsprays. It's wild to think that people were risking their health just to keep their hair looking perfect for a night out. Back in the 1960s, refrigerators posed more dangers than you might expect. Unlike today's models that can be easily opened from the inside, many older refrigerators sealed tightly, making it difficult for someone trapped inside to escape. Children, being naturally curious and always looking for hiding spots during games of hide and seek, sometimes crawled inside to play. Unfortunately, if the heavy door closed behind them, they could become trapped, leading to tragic suffocation incidents. Although safety regulations were introduced in the mid-50s to address the issue, many homes in the 60s still had these older models in their kitchens or garages, creating hidden dangers that parents were often unaware of. Back in the 1960s, doctors believed they had found a promising drug for expecting mothers, dithylstilbestrol. It was prescribed with the hope that it would help prevent miscarriages and complications during pregnancy. However, years later, researchers uncovered alarming evidence. Babies exposed to DES in the womb face significant risks for reproductive issues.
In a repeated national survey, doctors in all branches of medicine,
rare cancers, and fertility problems later in life. These individuals became known as DES daughters and DES sons. Although the drug was banned for use in pregnant women in 1971, the damage had already been done. Today, many people still grapple with the long-term effects of DES, marking it as one of the most significant medical mistakes of the 20th century. Can you believe that people were actually using leaded gasoline in their cars without fully grasping the risks? Back in the 1960s, gasoline was mixed with tetraethyl lead to help engines run smoother and reduce that annoying knocking sound. However, every time someone accelerated, tiny particles of lead were released into the air through the exhaust, where they could be inhaled by everyone nearby. This was especially dangerous for children, as lead exposure could impair brain development, hinder learning, and lead to lifelong health issues.
You've likely been exposed to lead because of leaded gasoline, and as a result, you're less intelligent.
Fortunately, by the 1970s, the harmful effects of lead became widely recognized, leading to a significant shift towards unleaded gasoline. Today, leaded fuel is banned in many places, marking an important advancement in public health. Thank goodness for that. Back in the 1960s, some fancy cars like coupes and roadsters featured what were known as rumble seats. Think of them as extra fold-out seats that popped out from the back of the car. Sounds super cool, right? It was a fun way to ride in style.
Here's a 1931 Ford Model A 5-window coupe.
However, there was a significant safety concern. Many of these cars did not have seat belts, so if the driver hit a bump or had to stop suddenly, whoever was sitting back there could be thrown out onto the road. Imagine cruising down the street, wind in your hair when bam, you're airborne. Not so fun anymore, huh? Over time, as safety standards evolved and consumer preferences changed, rumble seats became less common due to their potential dangers. It makes you wonder how anyone thought that was a good idea in the first place. Oh, here's a wild and scary fact. Back in the 1960s, methylene chloride was a popular solvent used to strip paint off furniture, walls, and cars. If you wanted to get rid of old paint quickly, this substance did the trick. But here's the catch. Just breathing in too much could lead to serious respiratory issues. Imagine trying to clean up your house and accidentally inhaling something that could knock you out or worse. Long-term exposure has been linked to cancer. Yikes. The worst part? Many people use this indoors without fans, masks, or even open windows. No wonder the U.S. has imposed restrictions on its use in consumer products.
Health authorities say there are dozens of people who have died from exposure to methylene chloride. Now, it can kill in minutes if inhaled, especially if you're in an enclosed space.
Today, we definitely have safer alternatives for removing paint. And back in the wild days of the 1960s, some toy makers seemed to think that the more thrilling a toy was, the more fun kids would have. Imagine toy rockets and cars powered by pressurized gas or tightly wound springs, zipping around at high speeds. Sounds exciting, right? But here's the catch. These toys could pose serious safety risks. One moment you're racing your toy car, and the next, you could be at risk of injury from flying parts or sharp edges. Many kids thought they were just having fun, but some ended up with cuts, bruises, and more serious injuries. It wasn't long before concerned parents and safety experts raised alarms about these hazards. As a result, new safety regulations were gradually introduced, leading to safer toys and the removal of the most dangerous products from store shelves.